Welcome to Mission Majjhima. Ajahn?
Ajahn.
Ajahn, so tell us about Majjhima Nikaya 89, the Dhammacetiya Sutta.
So in this sutta, the monuments of the Dhamma, we find King Pasenadi Kosala and the Buddha talking about some number of monuments of the Dhamma. And I feel it's a really useful list. There's a narrative background to this. So King Pasenadi and one of his ministers, Digha Karayana, are basically going to different pleasure parks, enjoying the day. And then King Pasenadi remembers how much he loves the Buddha and wants to express his love for the Buddha, goes to where the Buddha is staying and sees monks out walking jonggram, or walking meditation out in the open. And then he asks one of them, where's the Buddha? And they point him to the Gandha Kuti, or the fragrant kuti, where the Buddha is staying. And King Pasenadi of Kosala goes there and gives his royal crown or hat and his royal insignia, his sword, to Digha Karayana. And then he goes inside of the hut. And there's a whole longer narrative background around what's going on with this Digha Karayana palace intrigue. And it's actually a story about how Digha Karayana gives the kingship and these royal insignia to King Pasenadi's son. But none of that is really mentioned in the sutta. It's all commentarial. So the real heart of this are these 10 monuments of the Dhamma, which the Buddha at the end of the sutta says, you should learn these monuments of the Dhamma, memorize these monuments of the Dhamma, remember these monuments of the Dhamma. So King Pasenadi goes into the Buddha's hut and bows down to the Buddha and starts kissing his feet and saying his name. I am King Pasenadi of Kosala. And the Buddha asks, why is it that you give me this reverence, this offering of love? Why do you respect this body so much? And King Pasenadi names 10 reasons. The first is that King Pasenadi has seen wanderers of other sects, other samanas and brahmins, who live the holy life for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and then disrobe and then enjoy pleasures of the senses. Whereas here in the Buddha's dispensation, the Buddha's teaching, you've got monks who maintain their celibacy, their holy life vows for as long as life lasts. And we've actually seen other suttas already where even in the time of the Buddha, it's not like every monk who takes robes will stay a monk for their life. It is worth noting that some monks are staying in robes for their whole life. And what I think is interesting about these monuments of the Dhamma is that the Buddha calls them adi brahmacharya, fundamentals to the holy life, but adi here means preliminaries. These are, on some level, these are superficials of a holy life. But they're also essential, so both superficial and essential. And I think what's interesting here is that a lot of people, when they come to take robes, see these 10 monuments as rather superficial, like, okay, so people stay in robes for their whole life, and newly inspired convert Buddhists especially will tend to overlook and not respect people who've been in robes for a long time, giving that the deference that it's due. And similar with these other monuments of the Dhamma. The second one being that whereas kings argue with kings, and fathers with sons, and sons with fathers, and family members, etc., friends argue with friends, here in the Buddha's dispensation, we've got monks who are viewing each other with kindly eyes, blending together like milk and water, living the holy life in harmony. And again, this is something which someone can overlook as you take robes is, the fundamentals of the holy life are all about meditation, and getting along isn't that important. Whereas the Buddha here says, actually getting along is the essence, an essence. It's not just a superficial of the holy life. The third is that King Pasenadi has seen wanderers of other sects who are lean, kind of wretched, discolored, and hiding away as if they have something to hide. Whereas here he goes and sees the Buddhist monastics, and here I see bhikkhus smiling and cheerful, sincerely joyful, plainly delighting, their faculties fresh, living at ease, unruffled, subsisting on what others give, abiding with mind as aloof as a wild deer's. And then that makes King Pasenadi think that surely these venerable ones perceive successive states of lofty distinction in the Buddha's dispensation. That's significant. That, at the time of the Buddha, monks aren't just super grim, and this is something you do find in monasteries, whereas here, actually, there is some importance given to just outward signs of friendliness. The next, King Pasenadi finds that even though he's a king, not everybody listens to him, whereas in the Buddha's dispensation, monks will nudge each other even if they cough when the Buddha is giving a talk. The next four are, there are nobles, Brahmins, householders, and there are samanas who think they'll go and dispute the Buddha, whereas when they come to dispute the Buddha actually gives teachings and they end up converting or kind of seeing the logic of the Buddha's teaching. The next monument is that you've got King Pasenadi's main ministers of Isidatta and Purana, who, even though they're supported by King Pasenadi, rather than sleeping with their head facing King Pasenadi, they sleep with their head in the direction of where they know the Buddha is staying. And the final one, in certain countings, is that King Pasenadi says, okay, you're a Khattiya, you're a noble or an aristocrat, so am I. You're a Kosalan, so am I. You are 80 and I'm 80. So that's a reason why he respects him. And then he says, I've got lots of things to do, I'm going to leave. So he says these 10 monuments, and then the Buddha says, okay, go at your convenience. And then the Buddha says, learn these monuments of the Dhamma, memorize them, remember them. So that's the sutta. And I think it is interesting principles that are not just superficial, but point to an essence, a foundation, an adi brahmacharya, foundations of the holy life. So, Ajahn, what would you like to bring out?
As you noted, there's a very robust commentarial story where King Pasenadi's faith in the Buddha leads him to want a Sakyan wife from the Buddha's clan. The Sakyans, very prideful, send a slave girl to him instead. They conceive of Prince Vidudaba, his son. Prince Vidudaba later learns that he is kind of been deceived about his own heritage, develops a deep hatred of the Sakyans, and basically after the sutta usurps the throne, and then actually massacres the Sakyan clan. This sort of tragic storyline, but very dramatic. Even without that, which is largely commentarial, the relationship with King Pasenadi and the Buddha is amazing. There's a whole chapter of the Connected Discourses, the third chapter, dedicated to this relationship. King Pasenadi's the king of Kosala, where the Buddha spent 27 or so, maybe even more rains retreats. He ends up gaining faith through his wife Malika, largely. There's one instance where he asks the Buddha for diet advice. So really, it's an amazing relationship of a king who initially is quite skeptical and then comes in faith. And by the end of his life, which is this very poignant sutta, you see the level of that devotion, and it's beautiful. And it speaks to, the Buddha didn't go to the center of Brahminical power, which was in Benares, at least except for his first teaching, but mainly converted basically all these aristocrats and kingdoms around the periphery. So I really would encourage people to look up the Kosala Samyutta, number 3. But as to the monuments, they're just beautiful. And the one about living in concord, here I see bhikkhus living in concord, without disputing, with mutual appreciation, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with kindly eyes, piya chaku. And that sense of just this kindly eye, and that's, as you said, the adi brahmacharya, like the fundamental of the holy life, or one of them. There's the fact that when the Buddha converts people, he doesn't leave them downcast. It says that he gladdens them with a talk. And that's just a beautiful slight motion of like, even when he is victorious in a debate, the people leave inspired. There's the story of his 2 ministers, as you noted, who always point their heads towards the Buddha wherever he's sleeping. And they are acknowledged as at least stream winners in certain suttas, and maybe non-returners by their levels of enlightenment by the time of their death. And that just beautiful motion of like, no matter where we are, if the Buddha was alive, we would remember which direction that was in and sleep that way. And orienting our life around this. And then just how King Pasenadi notes how carefully we should listen to the Dhamma. And that this is how a monument of the Dhamma is how carefully the Buddha's disciples listened to him, that we should listen with respect, that we should try not to kind of be chatting in the side or drinking something. And in another sutta, the Buddha says that this is one's strength in Dhamma. Majjhima Nikaya 48 is the love and devotion to the act of listening to the teachings. So, Ajahn, what is the word of the week?
The word of the week is cetiya. Cetiya, which is translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi as monument. It comes from the root chi, which means to heap up. It's literally a mound of dirt. It's the root of the Thai word jedi, which are those monuments, those chetis, which you see all over Thailand, sometimes translated as stupa, these broader just mounds of earth that have been covered with paint and gold leaf often, and will oftentimes be housing a relic of the Buddha or of some other disciple of the Buddha, and we see them all over the world. So, chetiyas.
Well, may we make our life a cheti to the Dhamma, and we'll see some of you on Zoom in just a second, and otherwise next week for Majjhima Nikaya 90.
All right.
Ajahn.